So I did the math and I found out that almost half the videos on this channel are about trans identity, trans experiences, and generally just me being trans. But even though one of those videos is my coming out video, I realized that I've never actually shared the story of how I came to discover my identity. So, inspired by all the stories I've read in our comment section over the years, this is the story of how I went from identifying as a cis straight man to identifying as a non-binary lesbian. Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Maddie, and here on this channel we make videos about LGBT issues and mental health. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing and consider supporting us on Patreon, linked in the description below. So like I said earlier, this video is largely inspired by your comments. I've gotten quite a few comments from people who tell their stories of where they started and where they ended up in terms of their sexuality and gender identity, and it made me think that I should make a video to that end as well. But really, beyond just talking about myself for the next few minutes, the thing that I want people to take away from this video is that it is beyond okay to try on different labels, then figure out that another label suits you better. When I first came out as trans, I was super nervous about making sure I chose all the right labels that fit me best so that no one could question my identity. But the funny thing is, I actually struggled to watch my coming out video because it's so vastly different than how I understand myself now. But it's who I was then. It's a snapshot in time. Self-discovery is an ongoing journey. And with all that being said, let's get started. I think that the best, most honest way to tell my story is to say that I started off identifying as clueless. Like, I was told that I was a boy, he, him pronouns were bestowed upon me from before the time I was even born, but also from a young age I knew that I was different. I'm not someone who's always known that I was trans, but when you can make a video entitled 10 Signs I Was Trans but Didn't Know It, then follow that video up with another video entitled 10 More Signs I Was Trans but Didn't Know It, I honestly think it's fascinating that so many people were surprised when I came out. But also, one of the major reasons that I was probably so confused is because I'm part of an OSDD-1B system, so I'm not the only person who resides within this body. So it's a little bit harder to know who you are when you aren't the only you that you're getting to know over the years. So yeah, there was definitely quite a bit of confusion even from the get-go, but eventually I settled into my forced identity as a cisgender heterosexual male child. And I do mean forced because it's not just that I was expected to be a cishet boy, but it was demanded of me. Trigger warnings for discussions of homophobia, nothing too graphic or descriptive, but I feel like a warning is probably necessary. The day I learned what the word gay meant, it was because I was hugging a male classmate and one of my other classmates called it disgusting. The first time I heard a teacher mention anything LGBT related, it was within the context of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was easy to see the disdain in her face. And if that weren't enough, one of my classmates started gagging, which is a massive trigger for me, and a clear lesson at the time that queer folks were undesirable and wrong. So not only did I learn to be a cishet boy under the threat of eternal damnation, but I also learned to be a homophobe. And while I'm not proud of those years I spent hating the LGBT community under the guise of sincerely held religious beliefs, I honestly love the fact that I'm living proof that people can change. Because I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I am a proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community, and I will be until the end of time. But before I identified as part of the Alphabet Mafia, I identified as an ally, an overly invested ally at that. And making the shift from homophobia to allyship had everything to do with 3 people in my life. My mom, my cousin, and a really good friend of mine. You might be surprised to hear that my mom was a factor in me overcoming my prejudice, but my parents weren't really the ones who taught me to be a homophobe. My teachers and classmates were. I went to an ultra-conservative Christian school, and there was so much I had to unlearn once I realized that I'd been misled for so many years. But yeah, this friend of mine was pretty much the only person at that school who I knew for a fact was in favor of LGBT equality. We'd had conversations on the topic a few times, but we always just agreed to disagree. I was convinced that all queer people were simply awful and completely in the wrong. And one day, I was ranting to my mom about this particular position of mine, and after saying something that was probably particularly offensive, my mom cut me off and said, "You know your cousin is gay, right?" And that was the first moment when I realized that queer folks weren't those people over there, but people I actually knew. Good people, kind people, people who were deserving of love and respect. I didn't know how to reconcile this discovery with what the Bible said, or what I thought the Bible said, so I turned to my friend who was a Christian ally, and over a period of time I gradually started to deconstruct my homophobia. I actually still remember the day when the light bulb turned on, and I finally said, this hatred is ridiculous. I'm on the wrong side of history. I was a high school sophomore, and the very first thing I did as an act of defiance was following a few queer pages on Facebook and letting my friend know that I'd finally come around. So like I said, I started identifying as an ally during my sophomore year of high school, so that would be October or November of 2010, and that lasted until around the summer of 2011, the summer before my junior year. It was then that I started to get involved in my local community theater, and I started to realize that I really liked hanging out with queer folks. As I'm sure many of you know, theater tends to be a place where a lot of queer folks congregate, and considering the fact that the two main places where I really socialized before this point were in my ultra-conservative Christian school and my much less conservative but still overwhelmingly heterosexual church youth group, I had never really been in the presence of so many LGBT-identifying folks, and I liked it. It felt like home. And on top of that, I got to wear makeup, wear clothes that I'd never considered putting on my body out of fear of what other people might think. It changed my life. And I didn't come away from this summer with a newfound understanding of my sexuality or my gender identity. If you asked me how I identified then, I still would have said that I was a straight guy. But something definitely awoke inside of me that summer, and it was definitely the beginning of the end for my compulsory heterosexuality. Fast forward to the fall of 2011, more theater, more queer folks, and one of those queer folks introduced me to the TV show that would officially be my gay awakening, Glee. More specifically, Kurt Hummel, played by Chris Colfer. Prior to this point, I thought that I was only attracted to women, but I didn't know a man could look like that, dress like that, sing like that. I found him incredibly attractive. If we're being perfectly honest, I kinda still do. More on that later. But yeah, I quickly came to the conclusion that there was no way I could have the feelings I was having for Kurt and identify as straight. At that time, I didn't really consider myself sexually attracted to him or anyone else, so I adopted the label of asexual, and because I was attracted to women in general and exactly one man, I officially started to adopt the label of biromantic asexual. And in the summer of 2012, that's how I came out to the first person I ever confided in about my sexuality. The very same person who, just a couple years ago, was helping me realize that my homophobia was wrong. Also, fun fact, I came out to her in Italy. I think it was Montecatini, but it may have been Rome. My memory's a bit fuzzy. But yeah, that's completely irrelevant to the story, but I still think it's a fun little fact that the first time I came out was outside of my home country across the Atlantic Ocean. Over the next couple of months during my senior year, I started to question my gender just a little bit, but not really enough to pursue that line of questioning much further. I think I might have had more questions if I knew that non-binary people existed, but at the time I was convinced that there was no possible way I could be a woman. Around that same time, I learned that there were people who were only sexually attracted to people with whom they'd formed a close emotional bond, and I decided that sounded more like me and adopted the label of demisexual. And still within that same time frame, I discovered the existence of pan people and decided that pan romantic probably suited me better. I came out to a few friends as pan-romantic demisexual, and not all of them took it well. After that, I kinda stopped coming out to people. It never really came up in conversation, so I just let people think what they wanted to think. If people asked me how I identified, I'd usually just say something like, oh, I'm straight-ish, or I think I give myself a solid A-B+ at being straight. And honestly, it got the job done. They'd assume that I identified as male, gather that I was mostly attracted to women, but also pick up on the fact that I was occasionally attracted to men. It wasn't until I was maybe a junior in college that I finally decided to tell people that I was bisexual, like somewhere between 2015 and 2016. Granted, I'd been telling people indirectly that I was bisexual for years at this point, but I'd never used that word to describe myself. Also, I'm not sure when I stopped identifying as demisexual. Demisexual refers to people who need to establish a close personal bond with someone before experiencing sexual attraction, but for me, having that close personal bond is more of a preference and less of an innate sexuality. Just like there's a huge difference between being asexual and choosing to be celibate, I think there's also a big difference between being demisexual and wanting to be part of the friends to lovers trope. So around 2016, a lot of stuff happened in super rapid succession. First, a friend of mine introduced me to the concept of non-binary identities. Like, I knew that there were people who didn't identify as male or female, but it never really sunk in or made sense to me, and I never really felt the urge to research it further. But when they came out as a demi-boy, they introduced me to a website on non-binary identities, and after I read through some of the descriptions, I actually texted them and said, sounds like I might be a demigirl. Keep in mind, this was probably March or April of 2016, and I didn't officially realize that I was trans until February of 2017, but like, if Glee was my gay awakening, this conversation with my friend might have been my trans awakening. Then fast forward to the summer of 2016, I'm in a relationship with this girl and I suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I might be aromantic. As I'm reading through aromantic people's experiences both within and outside of romantic relationships, a lot of things are clicking for me, and I tell my then girlfriend, hey, I think this is something we should work through. She was willing to work with me on that, and eventually we came to the conclusion that I was still comfortable with most of the typical romance things, even if I didn't identify as allo-romantic, so it was probably best to proceed as if everything was normal. And so that's what we did. But then around September of 2016, I started to realize that I might not be cis. And when I asked her, hypothetically, how she would respond if I came out as trans, she told me, hypothetically, that she would break up with me because she wasn't attracted to trans people. Unpacking that statement alone could be its own video, so we'll move on from that. Even without her blessing, I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. I tell this story in a bit more detail in the video 10 Signs I Was Trans but Didn't Know It, but basically I started watching trans YouTubers, started posting in trans subreddits, started taking all the gender quizzes I could find, and so on. Then I broke up with that girlfriend in February of 2017. My dysphoria that I didn't know was dysphoria absolutely skyrocketed, mostly unrelated to the breakup, and the only thing that stood in the way of me accepting my trans identity at that point was me. I was afraid that my family and friends might not accept me. I was afraid that I'd never pass. I was afraid that I'd never have a normal life. And you know what? Those fears were valid, but only partially. Some of my family and ex-friends didn't accept me, but most did. On an average day, I don't pass, but some days I do. And being trans has made my life a bit complicated, but that hasn't stopped me from building a life with the one I love. So in either February or March of that year, I came out to myself as non-binary and bisexual, and just admitting that to myself made me the happiest I'd been in a long time. And that's the story I told in my coming out video. I'm non-binary and bisexual, but I'm primarily attracted to feminine people. But see, that wasn't the full picture. Because to this day, I'm somewhat torn over whether I'm non-binary or a binary trans woman. Like, the main reason why I don't identify as a binary trans woman is because of one of the tips that I mentioned in my 10 Signs You Might Be Non-Binary video. And it's a tip that I'm pretty sure I made up. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's a really good tip. It's the tip that asks if there were a non-binary restroom in addition to the men and women's restroom, which one would you pick? And if you were at a Battle of the Sexes trivia night or something similar, and there was a non-binary table in addition to the men and women's table, where would you sit? I 100% stand by all the tips I recommend in that video, but when you cite your own research, it's worth acknowledging that there might be some limitations. Also, one limitation of that particular tip is that there are any number of reasons why someone would choose any of the options. Like, I would use the non-binary restroom and sit at the non-binary table in a heartbeat, but is that because I actually identify as non-binary? Or is it because I know that I'll be safest with other non-binary people in a world that so often wishes harm upon black trans women like me? I definitely know that I'm trans. I definitely know that I use she, her pronouns exclusively, and that my gender identity is firmly on the feminine end of the gender spectrum. But the clarity and confidence that I tried to present in my coming out video was very much the result of fear that my identity would be called into question if I dared to admit that I was uncertain. That being said, I did firmly believe that I was bisexual when I made that video, and now I'm pretty sure that I'm a lesbian. But then again, I might not be, because here's the thing. I now recognize that I am solely attracted to femininity. I don't think I've ever been attracted to masculine people, which of course I mean no offense to the masked people watching this, y'all are absolutely fantastic. But as for me and who I'm attracted to, it's the femfolk all day every day. But here's the thing. My attraction isn't exclusively towards women, it's towards femininity. For example, if a non-binary person presents as femme, generally gives off femme vibes, but doesn't identify as a woman or even as femme, there's still a definite chance that I could be attracted to them. On the flip side, I think that masculine women are absolutely incredible, but masked women typically aren't my type. Though there are exceptions, let's be honest, TikTok is making me question so much about myself. And to make matters even more confusing, remember how I talked about Loki having a crush on Kurt Hummel from Glee? Yeah, his voice can still make me swoon. But then again, he's a soprano. It's the femininity for me. Likewise, I'm a fan of the mobile game Fate Grand Order. I'm currently saving up to roll for Saber Astolfo in November, partially because I like his gameplay, but mostly because I like his character and think he's cute. One might think that a lesbian would never think of someone who identifies as male as cute, but, like, just look at him. Seriously. But here's the thing. Kurt and Astolfo are both fictional characters. They're not real. I wouldn't date Chris Colfer, though I'd love to be his friend. And Astolfo's voice actors are women. I don't think I've ever been attracted to men in real life, and I know I've never been attracted to anyone who I would consider to be masculine. You could technically call me bisexual because I'm attracted to more than one gender, but let's be honest. When people hear the word bisexual, they typically think, oh, this person is attracted to men and women. So I refer to myself as a lesbian because it tends to convey who I'm attracted to more clearly, and perhaps more importantly, because it's what makes me most comfortable. So right now my official label is non-binary trans lesbian, or if I want to shorten it even further, non-binary lesbian or trans lesbian. This is the part when I should probably announce that this is the end of the story, but honestly, I'm not sure that it is. For one, I've recently been exploring the possibility that I might be polyamorous to a certain degree. It's not a sexuality or a gender identity, but it is a queer way of existing in the world. That being said, I'm not currently pursuing any other relationships besides the one I'm in, and I'm definitely not comfortable with just straight up saying, hey, I'm poly, in the same way that I might say, hey, I'm a trans lesbian. But it's something that my fiancé and I are both keeping an open mind to. Also, remember when I said that my ex-girlfriend and I basically decided that we would proceed as if I wasn't aromantic? Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure that I'm not somewhere on the aromantic spectrum. I know we have at least one aro alter in our system, so that might be where those feelings are coming from, but my fiancé and I have both decided that we'll keep an open mind to the possibility. Ultimately, I know that I love my future wife, she knows that I love her, and we can't wait to get married next year. That's what's most important to us. But it makes me happy that we have a relationship where we can openly question things like this without worrying about judgment or anything like that. But yeah, self-discovery is an ongoing journey, and I'd love to hear the story of how you got to where you are now in the journey of your identity. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon, links in the description below. But most importantly, remember that you're wonderful, and that the world is a better place because you're in it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!